Hello, I'm so proud to be here. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the invitation. In our garden, there is a pond with frogs. And we always had ponds with frogs in our gardens because I convinced or I forced my parents to dig ponds in the garden starting from an age of 8 or so, or 7 or 5 or 4. And now, a few years ago, we put another ingredient in one of our ponds to water buffalo. We're living, meanwhile, on a small farm. We have a little bit of space, a few hectares, have several ponds. And these water buffalo, alongside with a few ponies, they graze the area, keep vegetation short, and the ponds sunny. And the frogs, meanwhile, are fatter than ever. They are really well fed, and there are more frogs than ever since we have this water buffalo. And first, I wondered, what do the frogs do on the water buffalo? And then I remarked they do not use them as sun-basking places in the sun, but they forage there. They're looking for food, and there's plenty of food. And I was totally amazed that they have no fear of the water buffaloes. They have great fear when I go into the water. Never a frog climbs up on me, and I'm surrounded by these fat flies and horsefly as well. And the frogs, not only the frogs, also some birds and other animals, dragonflies, come, surround the water buffaloes and feed. And it's interesting to see how the wagtail, for example, this little bird, how effective it hunts for the horseflies and how ineffective the frogs are. So I thought to myself, well, there's still room for some evolution, or at least training for the frogs. Look at this. Even the aiming ability is something which is not developed to the highest level, but at least it's worthwhile also for the frogs, not only for the wagtail, 10 hunts, 10 flies, it's also worthwhile to the frogs to always anew climb up the buffaloes, fall down into the water. It's a loss of energy, climb up again. And I mean, for a frog, this is a small mountain. Why am I telling the story of our two hairy black monsters in our garden pond? The water buffalo was once part of our fauna here in Germany, in Middle Europe. We had a European water buffalo who went extinct in the mass extinction of large animals some 1,000 years ago. And when we look back into geological history of Central Europe, we see that it doesn't matter if we have cold periods, ice ages, or warm periods. In such a warm period, it's our period now. We always have a big set of large herbivores, always elephants, always rhinoceroses, always animals bearing antlers, and bovines and horses, and so on. But this ended some 10,000 years or so ago. And it was not a phenomenon of Europe. And large animals are neither a phenomenon solely of Africa. We always think, well, Africa is the continent of the large animals. That's not true. We once had the maximum numbers of very large animals was in the Americas. And wherever we look, we have these large herbivores, and most of them disappeared when modern man with modern hunting techniques entered the land and spread. So the Holocene, our area now, we are talking the whole day today and tomorrow about, was the era of the loss of the big mammals. They become extinct, or they became at least very rare. But at the same time, nearly at the same time, since the Neolithic, man started to graze the land with the descendants of these big mammals, especially with cattle and horses and water buffalo. And they were here by the millions. Alone in Germany 200 years ago, we had more cattle than we have today, and they knew no stable. They were outside in the forests, in the woods, in the fields. So we had a dramatic change. The wild animals were gone, but we had, for hundreds of years, this ecosystem engineers, horses, cattle, and more in the east of Europe, the water buffalo. And look at our two guys on the left side in our not far from this pond we saw before, and the beautiful Siberian flag, which is flowering and thriving much better now as we stopped mowing this meadow and started to graze it with our water buffaloes. Nature still knows how to deal with and to react to the presence of large animals. We have a lot of evolutionary anachronisms. Plants developed measures to prevent being eaten by the big mammals. We have unpalatable, bad-tasting weeds, for example. Of course, thorns and spines. We have these rosette growth plants growing and living in the space between the ground and the space where the lips and the teeth of the grazing animals work. So that's the Gänseblümchen, which has such a flat rosette that it still can survive on a Gänseweide, on a goose meadow or goose pasture. And not very well known, we have a guild also in Europe of large fruits which are not designed to be dispersed by typical seed dispersed by birds because they are too big for birds. They don't have bright colors to attract the birds. They often ripe late in the year, and when they ripe, they fall down to the ground, and they originally would attract large mammals to eat a heap of these fruits, and on the way through their world without fences and without roads, they would disperse these trees. So it comes that we have some of these trees, wild apple, whole Germany, 2,400 specimen, or the sorb apple, another very rare, very nice, very big tree, which is down to 2,500 specimens or so. And there are many more other connections between small animals, fungi, plants, and so on, and the large animals. And forests or areas where you have large herbivores who work on vegetation, or maybe younger trees, because they rub and gnaw and eat and shrub, we have more tree hollows. And in these tree hollows, you have a special fauna. And so it comes, you have not so many tree hollows anymore as in former times. And so it comes that the hermit beetle and its main predator, the rusty click beetle, are at the top of the red list of rare species now. And even between the roots of trees which live in a grazed area, there are strange creatures like these Bolbelasmus unicornis, one of the rarest beetle, only was found one time in 50 years, 2 years ago. And this is all the musician under our beetles. It only emerges in the evenings for half an hour only before it digs deep down again, between the roots of the oak tree, and with sound calls for mates. Anyhow, so this is a type of landscape, of habitat, which once was typical for Central Europe, not the dense Norwegian spruce areas we heard this morning from the guy from the Versicherung. And this is, sorry, but it was a very intelligent thought, I think. So, and this is a type of habitat, and now it comes, this is a type of habitat which harbors nearly all of our fauna and flora and all the fungi. It's a mixed habitat. You see, there's a lot of dynamic. It's not just grow tall and shaded out. If you compare this to a forest, forests only harbor a small part of our fauna and flora. And for a book, we asked many professional ecologists and taxonomists for their special group of organisms, how many of their group of organisms, how many members, how many would live in forests, in closed forests, as we know them today typically. And you see the percentage, right? There's no group of organisms where the majority lives in forests. In contrary, often, like in flies or birds or whatever, only a small part live in forests. And the main thing here is that of these animals, and also mosses and plants and so on, only a part which can live in forests live necessarily in forests. Look at our spiders. You all love spiders, I guess. We have in Germany 1,000 around species of spiders. Exclusively in forests, so only 2 or 3 species. Exclusively in sunny, open habitats are the half of our species, and the rest is non-specific. So the result is, wherever you go, you see some spiders, but these two figures, 0.5% and 50%, sheds light on how looked our land in former time, in pre-human time, which should be a target idea for nature conservation and for biodiversity restoration. And this is the reason for it. Of course, if you have a very high disturbance of an habitat, the species richness is low. Not many animals can cope with a high disturbance. But if you have a low disturbance, and often today we think, leave nature alone, then you have low disturbance. But when there is no dynamics, species richness also is low. What we need is an intermediate disturbance. That is why gardens can harbor so many species, because in a garden you have an intermediate disturbance. You mow here, you have a compost here, you have your hecke here, and you have a terrace here, and everything. It's a mix of small habitats. And if you look at areas on the world which are healthy in terms of biodiversity, large habitats where nature thrives. We go first to Africa, African national parks. Everybody's going there taking photos of large animals, of butterflies, of turtles, of lizards, of plants. Wow. And you count, then you see you have 10 to 25 tons of large herbivores per square kilometer. Then you go to the mammoth steppe in Siberia, where there are no more big animals, but the thawing permafrost, which unfortunately due to climate change sets free all it harbors in its belly, sets free a lot of bones from the ice age. And you count these bones, or scientists did count these bones, and it came up that in the ice age, in the north of Siberia, there were 10 to 20 tons of large animals per square kilometer. And if you look at rewilding areas in Central Europe, we have more and more rewilding areas where cattle and horses and water buffalo do their job to enhance biodiversity. They all work with 10 to 25 tons of large herbivores per square kilometer. So I thought, what was this silvipasture? It's always blamed silvipasture. It killed the forest, it destroyed the forest. If you combine the few really reliable figures you can get in the internet, you find out that in old times, the farmers knew what they did. They sent 10 to 30 tons of cows and horses and so on to the forest to graze them, but they don't want it to overgraze the area, because the next year they wanted again to have they wanted to have enough food for their animals. And what do we have in our national parks? Not even a ton per square kilometer. So I'm quickly a bit fertig. And by the way, trees can very well regenerate under grazing conditions. This is a rewilding area, 20 tons of large animals, 40 animals per 100 hectares. And the trees do not rely only on jays and mouses to bury their acorns and seeds, but they rely also on thorny bushes, light-demanding bushes that grow there. Amidst them, they can grow tall until they are resistant enough. Das nervt ja fast. Sorry. To persist big animals. So, 3 more charts. Large animals can bring back substantially biomass of insects to our landscapes. A single cow, 100 kilograms per year. Carbon sequestration is a big issue. We could do a 1-hour session only on carbon sequestration in grasslands. Grasslands with big animals store more carbon in the ground, in the soil, than a forest can. A huge topic. So, this chart only anymore. So, a grazed area, a naturally grazed area with not too many but not too few animals is a win-win situation, and it's beautiful as well. The only thing we have to do, pay Mr. Söder, pay less for bad farming practices, pay a little bit more for good farming practices. Thank you.